So this is a little bit unorthodox for me, but I've been playing a lot of card games recently, and the new expansion for Hearthstone is super interesting actually for me. And so I wanted to, I guess, just go through some of the cards that have been revealed so far and share my thoughts on them. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do here. I've watched a few videos about just a little bit of these. Like, I've seen some of these neutral cards already, and I vaguely know about the starship mechanic. So I actually really like the idea of starships, but I'm a little bit tentative about whether or not I think they're going to be good. I would love for them to be a fun thing to interact with, but we'll kind of just see how that plays out in practice, I guess. So anyways, let's look at some of these cards. I'm going to go through the neutral ones here, and I'll probably split this up into multiple recordings just because, like, obviously there's a lot of classes to actually look at here. So let's start with this one. The Ceaseless Expanse. Now, 100 mana is insane, but obviously you'll never be playing this at 100 mana. So this costs one less for each time a card was drawn, played, or destroyed. Now what that means is, you know, every time that you do that and every time that your opponent does that. If we look at trying to get this down to 10, let's just say every single turn each player is drawing one, playing one. I'm not positive, because the word destroyed is listed here, right? Does destroyed count minions dying on the field? If it doesn't, that makes this card worse. If it does, it makes it better, right? So let's just presume an average tempo game, let's say, right? Which would be around one, maybe two cards played each turn. It depends. Like, if people were playing on curve, then it would kind of just be one card per turn. So let's even just look at it that way, right? So let's say each player each turn is playing on average one card. They're drawing one card, obviously, and they are potentially destroying one minion. Let's say one minion every other turn or something like that, right? I mean, that's a lot of turns to get this down. Like, you know, for the sake of argument, that's probably around turn 10. Now, obviously, I suppose in like an aggro game where people are... Well, actually, is it even turn 10? No, hold on. In that scenario that I'm listing, that would be 10 turns to be 60 mana less. It would actually be like 15 turns to get it down to, I guess, around 10 mana, which is kind of abysmal. Maybe I'm wrong. Or maybe I'm just misreading this. And obviously, like I said, in like an aggro deck, the thing is, I guess that this would actually, in that case, like, you wouldn't be playing this... That's not entirely true. You never want to have a dead card in hand, right? That's just never, ever a good thing. So, like, drawing this turn one means you're playing with one less card for the whole game. If this had tradable on it, I'd say that would make it infinitely better than how it is right now. But like I was going to say, I think that putting this into an aggro deck potentially works better, but I don't think that you would want to play this in an aggro deck, because the problem is, by the time that you would even get close to playing this anyways, you would want to just have one. So realistically, this goes into like probably hard control, where you can count on the fact that you could probably last 15 to 20 turns into a game. And then at that point, yeah, it's just a board clear. Like, it's as good as Reno. It's a second Reno, I guess, right? Destroy all other minions. It's not quite as good, actually, as Reno, even in that case, because it destroys your minions as well. But I guess that could also be good. potentially for you. It's a little bit of a toss-up. I could see this fitting into a big priest, big warrior deck where they obviously just like control a game to the point where this could just slot in. I guess cheating it out is also an option. Like obviously 15-15 is great stats, so if you can like recruit it or some other thing in wild, then that's pretty good. And actually one other person that was evaluating this did mention that the paladin deck that, you know, like deal damage equal to the cost of whatever you draw, presuming that this actually draws as 100 mana, means that you basically just win the game if you're able to reorder your deck from highest to lowest and then go for the combo, right? So that's not super ideal, but very interesting card. I'm excited to see, like, if this slots mostly into control, then I like it. But if it starts to slot into other stuff, then I'm a little bit worried, because Reno can already be kind of frustrating to play against. Now, granted, this is not as good as Reno in two ways, because Reno also limits board space, right? This would potentially be the best answer to Reno. Obviously, like, if your opponent gives you one board space and you can drop Ceaseless Expanse, then you've made it so you don't just lose next turn. But, yeah. Interesting card. Not sure how well it'll play out. I guess, obviously, you can do a lot of things to make it come out sooner, like Sir Finley could be interesting, and then, you know, Warlock can do a ton of things to do that. I don't know how to rate this as it is, because I would really need to see the metagame and, like, you know, what the draw situation is for individual decks to know how this slots in. But my initial impression would be hard control is what this would slot into, and you would play this closer to the end of a game, right? Moving on, we got Red Giant. Now this is cost one less for each adjacent card played while in hand. That is really hard to work around, I feel like. Maybe not, though. I guess like a rogue deck could probably slot this in fairly easily. It depends, right? Like, let's say you draw this turn one, or not turn one, let's say that you draw this in your opening hand, or rather you mulligan and this is slotted on the far left of your hand. That's like infinitely worse in my mind than if it shows up like one turn into the game or whatever and it's on the far right of your hand. Because then at least you got some room on both sides that you can kind of work with, right? But yeah, low curve decks could probably make this thing work regardless. The big thing for a low curve deck, though, is if you're running like aggro and this thing, you know, you draw into this turn 8 or whatever and you have no other cards in your hand, it's really not worth it, right? You would want to have this like turn 1 or 2, play cards consistently next to it, drop it on like turn 5 or 4 or something like that, right? For a pretty decent discount, as well as other minions on that same turn. So consistency wise, this thing confuses me a little bit. Then again, you could probably also slot it into heavy draw decks and stuff like that. Maybe that. Yeah, I feel like Rogue probably makes the most use out of this, and maybe that doesn't need to be an aggro deck, but I'd need to kind of see the deck list to really visualize that. We got Splitting Space Rock. This is a rare 8/8 for 8. Death Rattle summon 2/4/4 Splitting Boulders. And it's an elemental. Is this good? It's not got Taunt, and it's an 8/8 for 8. So I don't see this being, like, exceptionally worth playing at 8 mana, you know? Like, there are better things to drop for almost your entire mana pool, right? Like, maybe in a situation where you're playing, like, Druid or Warrior now, I guess, with the you know, increase your maximum mana by 3. So this is like, if you're playing 2 of those, and this is only half of your mana. But I don't think so. I don't think it doesn't have Rush, it doesn't have Taunt, and it's at 8 mana. If you can discount it significantly, or if you can cheat it out, you know, obviously it's got good stats and it sticks around pretty hard. It's hard to get rid of, but, you know, I don't think that this thing sees much play. Maybe I'll reevaluate some stuff once I've gone through, like, the entire set, just to, you know, kind of think about, but yeah, does this fit into, like, current decks? I don't think that you would play this in, like, an elemental shaman or an elemental mage. I don't know. Yeah, I'll see if there's anything that's, like, an enabler for this and any other stuff, and then maybe I'll make, like, an addendum at the end if I notice something else. We got the Exodar. Now, from what I've heard, it's 5 or 6 of the classes get their own spaceship, or starship rather, and then this is a neutral one. Or no, this isn't a neutral one, I guess. This is this a starship part, though? If you're building a starship, launch it and choose a protocol. Oh, protocols are a whole other thing. Let's, Exile's Hope, Emergency Repairs, Offensive Formation. Okay, so these are the protocols then. Has the stats and effects of your dead pieces, click to launch. Right, okay. So this, the 5 mana part of this would be, like, basically, when you've got a starship that you're building, you can just click it for 5 mana and it launches, right? So this is giving you a 6/10 in addition. So you're getting a 6/10 for 3 mana, and you get to use a protocol. Now let's look at some of these protocols. That's not a protocol. Is this a protocol? Gain armor equal to the starship's health twice. Okay. So that could be pretty nice. In, like, a control deck, that would be pretty hard to deal with. If you also even just use this on, like, warrior and then use the thing where, you know, you can deal damage equal to your armor, that's, you're probably wiping out your opponent's board. Deal damage equal to your starship's attack randomly split between all enemies. Someone described this as like the final form of, you know, like the legendary guy that's like a 2/2 that does 2 damage, and then a 5/5 that gives you 5 armor, and then an 8/8 that deals 7 or 14 damage. So obviously pretty good. And then crew transport, get copies of all starship pieces, all these starships pieces, so the ones that you already got, and set their costs to 1. So you could essentially, I feel like that's probably the best one. I mean, if you're using the Exodar, then you don't get to just launch 2 starships in a turn, assuming once again that you're not playing like Druid or Warrior, where you would have up to 13 or 16 mana. And actually, no, but you know what though? Like, let's say you launch the Exodar, or you use the Exodar, which gives you your spaceship, and use crew transport as the protocol. I mean, at the very least, you could drop 2 additional starship pieces, assuming you're on 10 mana, and therefore be well on your way to putting another starship into play, right? I feel like this is really solid as a card, because when you really look at it, unless I'm completely incorrect, you're getting 6/10 for 3, because 5 mana would have gone towards launching your starship anyways, right? So this one seems strong. I feel like any deck that's running a starship should probably run the Exodar to go along with it. Okay, next up we got Eridar Brute. 7 mana, 5/6, taunt, lifesteal. Costs 1 less for each enemy minion. Okay. This seems really good, actually. Maybe not in every single deck kind of good, but it's like a super strong anti-aggro minion, right? Because if your opponent ends up with 7 minions on board, this is free. And it's got taunt and lifesteal. So it's not just like I just put a big minion on the board and it doesn't do anything for a turn. It's like, I put a big minion on the board, and if you've got 5 1/1s, they just have to attack into it or just sit there. And then if they just sit there, then I can slowly start chipping away at them. I like it. It might be too strong. Like, not too strong, but it might be strong enough that it shuts down any aggro strategies. I mean, obviously, you can only run 2 ofs, so, like, the odds of you just drawing into this when you need it all the time is not super high, but yeah, it feels very strong to me. Because even, let's say that you draw into this and your opponent has, like, 2 minions on board. Like, 5 mana for a 5/6 taunt lifesteal isn't bad anyways, to me. So it kind of scales. Like, obviously, if your opponent has more minions, then it's, like, way better. But even on the low end, like, it's... You know, I could see dropping this on, like, 4 or 5 mana and being relatively happy with that. So I think this is pretty good. I feel like this would be, not include in every deck, but include in a lot of decks kind of thing. Next up, we got Galactic Crusader. 7 mana, 3/9, taunt. Death Rattle, get 2 random holy spells. They cost 3 less. Now, this is part of the new tribe Draenei, which isn't listed here. It's listed there, but I can't just like see all the other ones. Presumably, there is some synergy for those though, but I haven't seen any Draenei as of yet, so I can't really speak to that. But yeah, Death Rattle, get 2 random holy spells. They cost 3 less. 7 mana, 3/9. I could see this being useful in a deck where you want to cast a bunch of spells. Obviously, getting discounted anything is pretty nice, but the fact that you have to be at 7 mana to drop this guy and then wait a little while longer to even get the effect, like it's not like it's a battle cry, means that it's like not easy to just slot this in, I guess is what I would say about it, right? Like if this was a lower stat line, lower mana cost, I could see this being like pretty good in a lot of spell-based decks, but yeah, this is a high cost for something that, and because they're random as well, it's like, what is the value? Like, it's hard to say. I mean, there's a lot of holy spells probably that wouldn't even be above 3 mana. And so if you get those, then it's kind of like, wow, this... I mean, I guess I get to cast something for 0, but... Yeah, I guess even... And then if you look at the high end, like, I don't know every holy spell in the pool right now anyway, so it's hard to say without really just digging deep into that and knowing, but I would say this doesn't seem super great to me. Alright, legendary. Neutral legendary. Kill Jaden. 7 mana, 7/7. Ooh, it's a new Dr. Boom, maybe. Battle Cry, replace your deck with an endless portal of demons. Each turn they gain additional 2/2/2/2. I actually was reading this one before I started recording because I was a little bit confused. I can't find... I mean, I guess I could have actually, like, looked this up, but I didn't find any additional information directly on the Hearthstone website about this. So I'm going to go based off of my assumption of how this works. My presumption, I guess. Yeah, whatever. It's basically the same thing. This seems to me like you get a portal that... so instead of having a deck, you have a portal. Therefore, you don't take fatigue damage. In addition to that, every single turn, instead of drawing a card, it either just gives you a demon into your hand that each turn, gains +2/+2. Is it a random demon? Is it like a set, like, the first one is just a 1/1, the second one's a 3/3, the third one is a 5/5, and so on? Or is it like from the pool of demons, you get a random demon every turn? So that's my first question. Second question is, do they go onto your board or do they go into your hand? I mean, at the point that you're playing something like this, it'd probably be better for them to go into your hand so you can activate battle cries and stuff like that. But obviously, if they go directly to the board, then that's kind of like mana cheating, which can be nice. But it's not like you're drawing into anything else after this, so confusing a little bit. I could see this being a strong ender to a game. I mean, obviously it would work pretty well in like a, Warlock because it's demons, but I mean, I could see this even going into like a control kind of deck where it's just anti-fatigue. It's like, okay, well, the game's never going to end because I'm just going to keep on getting minions forever, right? Like, if you drop this as a very heavy control priest at the end of a game, I'm thinking wild as well now, not just like standard. If you drop this at that point, I mean, you probably just win, right? Like, you no longer have the ability to run out of gas. And that's actually a little bit odd kind of design philosophy, because it's like, let's say that both players do just drop a Kill Jaden. I mean, I guess there's no more winning by fatigue, but is that actually good for the game? Like, theoretically, a game could go on for like an extra 15 to 20 minutes, if not even longer, with something like this. I guess there's still like a turn limit, but like, it could just be like a really frustrating fatigue thing, but without fatigue. So I don't know. This is interesting. It's a little bit odd. Theoretically, it could work in anything, I guess. Like, if you're playing super aggro and you're dropping most of your deck really quickly, why not just drop this on 7 and get rid of the rest of your deck and start getting, like, strong minions anyways, right? So, this seems pretty strong to me. I could be incorrect. I guess the biggest disadvantage to it is that it's a 7-mana 7/7 that on the turn that it's played does nothing. So the biggest disadvantage is if you're not already at a neutral or advantageous board state when you're playing it, then this could lose you the game, right? Like, if you are at all behind, your opponent probably just hits you 3 times in the face and you die. But from a neutral board state, so if no one has anything on the board and you play this, you're probably winning. Unless they also can just do the same thing, right? So, interesting. I guess it fits better into control for that reason, but I could see it going in a lot of different archetypes potentially. We got Velen, Leader of the Exile. This is another 7-mana 7/7. Taunt, Death Rattle. Trigger the battle cries and death rattles of all other Draenei you played this game. Okay. So this one is impossible for me to evaluate until I've seen all the other Draenei, really. We've seen one other Draenei so far, which I guess this makes that better and that makes this better, but I mean, Battlecry and... no, this is the Death Rattle of Velen. Is that good? It's got a taunt on it, but presumably you wouldn't want to just drop this on turn 7. You would want to be like building up to it for a while. Like, this is similar to playing what's it called? The Battlecry guy in Wild, Shudderwalk, or the other one, Hadronox for Druid, right? Or I guess, is Hadronox... I don't know. One of my buddies always plays Hadronox, and he plays it in Druid, so I'm not positive if it's a neutral or if it's a Druid-specific card. But anyways, yeah. This could be strong. This could be weak. Yeah, I would really need to know what all the other guys are to really evaluate it. I mean, the problem with this really is that if it's that strong, it's a death rattle. Like, theoretically, people could just start playing Silence in their decks, and now you just played a 7-mana 7/7 that you've been building towards for the whole game, and it did nothing for you, right? So that's less ideal. I guess, depending on the deck, you could play and kill it in the same turn if it's like you desperately need to activate the effect. Or in some decks, you could like copy and do other things. So it's interesting. I'll evaluate more once I've seen more Draenei, though, because it's kind of hard to say how good this is. Next up, we got Light Fused Mana Saber, 6-mana 6/6, Rush and Spell Burst, gain Divine Shield. Okay, let's say that you play this on turn 7, activate the Spell Burst using a 1 mana spell. Or actually, realistically, you could play this on turn 6 and activate it using a coin or like a 0 cost. Like, you know, that could happen. Is it that good? Obviously, keeping stats on the board is nice. The thing is, I'm comparing it in my mind immediately to the, is it 6 mana? I feel like it's 5 or 6 mana, 6/3, Death Rattle, Excavate, and it's a rush as well. Where, like, obviously with that, you're not keeping any stats on the board, like, almost obviously. Like, there are times where I've used that and, like, ran it into a 1/1 or something just to keep it around, but the majority of the time I feel like you're dropping that and just like suiciding into something that has 6 health. So the advantage to this is that you could do the same thing but keeps a 6/6 on the board because it's got Divine Shield. I could see this being pretty good. I could see it being pretty useful in any deck that can consistently activate the spell burst. Thinking about it from like a top deck perspective, it's still a rush 6/6. Like, that's not terrible. It's obviously better when you can activate the spell burst though. So yeah, I could see this being pretty decent. I don't think it's an auto include for anything, but definitely could be pretty good in specific decks. Next up, we got Ace Wayfinder. 5 mana, 5/5. They're doing a lot of, you know, mana cost is equal to attack and health in this expansion. Now, this is a Draenei, so this can help us evaluate Velen. We got Battlecry, gain 2 random bonus effects. The next Draenei you play gains them as well. Velen is also a Draenei, and this would then mean that you're not always just like dropping Velen last, right? Because theoretically you could then boost your further Draenei even after Velen dies. So, okay. Gain 2 random bonus effects. Bonus effects are, I would presume, like taunt, not death rattle, taunt, poison or toxic or whatever, potentially rush, divine shield, maybe like a +1 or +2 to one stat or another. Like, is this like, are these bonus effects like adapts or whatever the mechanic was? Needs further information, I would say. Let's say it is how I'm thinking though. 2 random bonus effects. There's no discover, so it's just complete random. Let's say that this, I drop it and it gets like taunt and rush. The taunt was useless. The rush, you know, or maybe one of those 2 effects is useless. Because there's no discover attached to this, I feel like it's obviously worse than like other things that you know, other types of cards that have been similar to this. But I could see this, you know, let's say that people are trying to build Draenei decks, like this could be kind of nice. Long term, the more times that you trigger an effect like this, the better it's going to be ultimately. And if you drop 2 of these and there's like only, let's say 5 or 6 effects, like you're not guaranteed to get any one of them, but you're getting closer to being guaranteed to get, you know, you're stacking the odds in your favor, right? So that's interesting. I'd love to see what the bonus effects actually are, but it just doesn't say them here, so we're moving on. Lunar Trailblazer. 5 mana, 6/4. Battlecry, set the cost of a random spell in your hand to this minion's cost. Immediate thought is this goes pretty well in the mana cheat mage deck that everyone's been running already. The fact that it's a random spell means that you can't guarantee anything, but obviously setting a spell to 5 can just be really, really obnoxious. Anytime there's mana cheating, it's pretty good. The stat line on this is not incredible. So this is probably another situation where, like, I mean, even in the mage deck that, you know, I've run it a couple times, right? You don't end up playing some of the minions unless you get ahead on board, right? So like, you know, you can't just decide to drop the one that's like the next spell that you draw casts when drawn or whatever, right? You can't just play that unless you are not going to just die to whatever your opponent is doing. Especially because you can't just guarantee that effect is going to like do anything for you. The nice thing about this is on turn 5 you could play this. With coin on turn 4 you could play, which is even better. But on turn 5 you could play this. On turn 6 you could then play your avalanche or whatever the heck the thing's called. Like the one that summons the 4 water elementals and then just ruins your opponent's day. You could also do the same thing for the, you know, deal a bunch of damage and then summon a 9-cost minion. So I could definitely see this fitting in there. I could also see it being in specific decks that try and cheat out other big spells. You know, if you're able to play the other minion in the mage deck, then obviously this could be pretty alright. But you would really only want to play this in decks that have mostly big spells. And then that you can dump the small spells without it being a big deal. So maybe this might not actually even fit all that well into the big mage deck, because the problem with that is you would be limiting your ability to use coins and swap costs on those. Or like, you know, the snake oil and other like low cost spells. Yeah, this might fit into completely different styles of decks that I'm not thinking of. Like maybe there's like a, you know, a deck where you run like one 10-cost spell that you just want to cheat out early, and then I mean maybe like Order in the Court Paladin or something where you draw into this early and then reorder your deck, play this after you've drawn your high cost whatever, and then play the next thing after that. It's hard to guarantee anything like that could even happen though, so I don't know. This might not be that good. Mutating life form, 5 mana, 3/8. After this survives damage, gain a random bonus effect. Is there? I'm gonna on my other screen just look this up. Hearthstone bonus effects. The bonus effect is one. Okay, here this will help. Okay. Bonus effect is one of 8 randomly chosen keywords: Taunt, Wind Fury, Divine Shield, Poisonous, Elusive, Rush, Lifesteal, or Reborn. Okay. Obviously, this card is bad. I don't think this ever sees... I doubt that this ever sees play. I guess you could play this on 7... on like mage and then ping it, or maybe, you know what, you could like activate this a ton of times. Like let's say that you set up your board. Now this is like a perfect situation kind of deal, right? But let's say that you set up the board and then play, oh, what is the stupid card called? It's Warlock or Death Knight, or maybe both of them. No, Warlock and Death Knight have separate ones that do similar things. The one that does like 1 damage to all minions repeatedly, where in one case it's like if any dies then repeat this, and you know, whatever else. So if you were able to climb steadily to the point where you could, you know, let's say you procced this 7 times in one turn, is that even good? I mean, you kind of want to double the stats on it or something before you even do something like that, but I mean, I could see some meme decks running something like this and then like abusing the fact that you could get like every keyword onto one thing. And it's an all as well, so theoretically it could get tribal bonuses. It's interesting. This could be, I could see like meme decks, you know, setting up their entire game just to drop a mutating life form and then killing everything else on the board to get like, you know, a 3/8 with Divine Shield, Taunt, Wind Fury, Lifesteal, Poisonous, Evasive, or Elusive, you know, whatever else. Even in that case, like, let's assume that you got almost all the effects and it's on 1 health. you're still only doing 6 damage per turn with it. And that's assuming that your opponent doesn't just drop something in the way of it to make it essentially useless. I'd say if you can double the stats effectively, like, often, this could be pretty fun. But I don't see it seeing extensive play. Unless I see something crazy. You know? Maybe there's something that enables that. We got Star Vulpera. This is a 5 mana, 4/5 tradable. We don't see tradable like come up all that often, so it's nice to see it when you do. Battle Cry, destroy an enemy starship or starship piece. I don't like this as a card. I don't like it because immediately it makes a lot of types of things that starships can do, like, just generally go off the table. Because theoretically, like, if starships are too strong, you run 2 of this card in every deck, and then you just trade it out for 1 mana whenever you don't need it. Which allows you to cycle your deck pretty well, right? Like, you know, cards like Big Game Hunter and... I mean, it depends. There have been cards in the past that saw a lot of play, even though their effect was limited. And this has tradable on it as well, so... I mean, yeah, the way that I see this is, if starships are good, people will run this in, like, every deck to counter starships, in which case starships can't be as fun as they theoretically could be. So yeah, pretty good, but unfortunate, I guess. Starscale Constellar. Constellar? 5 mana, 4/7, Spellburst to double this minion's attack. Is that good? It's a dragon as well. I'm looking at the card thinking it's like an elemental or something. Dragon. I don't know how many dragon synergies we would have in the current state of Hearthstone to really justify, you know, using it with them. I mean, it's not terrible. Theoretically, once again, if you have like something that can easily enable this, if you throw this in a rogue deck or something, it's a 5 mana 8/7. But is that great? Like, it's not like you can activate spell bursts more than once, right? Spell burst is a one-time effect, yeah. So, you know, it could be annoying, I guess. There are probably easier ways to get a big minion with no other effects on it. So, maybe dragon synergies could really bring this one home. Otherwise, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's incredible. Arcanite, Defense Crystal. 4 mana, 3/4. Taunt, Death Rattle, gains 6 armor. And this is a starship piece. Okay. So that means when it dies, or when you use it, it does the effect. And then it also adds that effect onto the starship. Let me just confirm. Starship has stats and effects of your dead pieces. Yeah. So when this dies, it adds 3/4 and gains 6 armor to your starship. It's a taunt as well, but the mana cost for stats is a little bit low. Like, isn't it, the stupid frog with taunt is like a 4 mana 3/4, but it turns one of your other minions into that as well? Am I correct about this? I might not be correct. Somewhere around there. Anyways, it feels like low stats, but obviously a Death Rattle can kind of make up for that a little bit. Yeah, and more control-y decks I could see just throwing this in. Warrior decks could probably make good use of it. You know, maybe Taunt Warrior will become more of a thing. 6 armor's never a bad thing just to get, because it's essentially like guaranteed healing. So yeah, maybe a lot of decks that run starships would want to run something like this. But if there's any issue with it, I'd say that it's the mana cost for stats is a little bit low. Next up, we got Doom Maiden. 4 mana, 4/4, battle cry, draw a card from your opponent's deck. If you don't play it this turn, put it back. This is interesting. I don't see this seeing extensive play because, I mean, realistically, it's a random card. You don't get a discover. So there's the possibility you drop this on turn 10, thinking that it gives you the maximum potential to actually use its effect, and you draw into a 7 or higher cost card and you can't use it. In Rogue, you could almost guarantee the use by playing the thing that reduces the cost of your next non-rogue card by 3. That's assuming you're not in a rogue mirror match. It's interesting. I could see this being fun to play around with, but really, because there's no guarantee, I'm just thinking of worst case scenarios, right? In a worst case scenario, you are drawing a card from your opponent's deck that you cannot play, so you just played a 4 mana 4/4 do nothing. You know what though? There is one additional thing that you could think about with this card. If you... Oh, but this would be in your hand, so you can't guarantee that. If there was any way to make your hand full while you play the battle cry of this card, you could just instantly burn one of your opponent's cards. I also wonder if you played this in Rogue and then shuffled your hand into your deck or used Sir Finley Murgleton or whatever, if the card just stays in your deck. I would assume it does, because that's usually how stuff like this works. So, I mean, it could be an interesting way to kind of just troll your opponent, but the thing is, is a random card from your opponent's deck generally worth using? Is the other question. Obviously there are some things where, there's, what's it actually called? The guy that eats minions out of your opponent's deck. That's nice, because unless you're playing into, no minion decks, you're guaranteed to get the effect, and it doesn't really matter what it eats. The best case, the high roll is that it eats something really useful, and the low roll is that you still got the stats, and it ate something. In this case, the lowest roll is that you can't even play the card, and the middle tier roll is that you have to play some card that doesn't really benefit you, or else it just goes back to your opponent and this was useless. So it's odd. I don't know. Like I said, if there was a deck where, I'm thinking if there was a way to play Rogue in a super control-y way, that could be interesting, I guess. But, or if there's another, deck that is able to consistently play this and then shuffle their hand back into their deck, and then that actually does keep the card, then you're essentially putting your opponent closer to fatigue, so it could almost be like mill at that point. Interesting card. I don't see it seeing much play unless, you can really do something like what I was saying there, I guess. Crimson Commander, 3 mana, 4/3. Battlecry and Death Rattle give all Draenei in your hand +1. I don't really think... Sorry, I'm going to just keep the music going here, because for whatever reason this playlist just stopped, I guess. There we go. I'm never a fan of cards that are conditional to hand. To hand feels weak. To hand deck battlefield feels too strong generally. But, I don't know. I shouldn't be so judgmental, because, hand buff is obviously, a really strong archetype for paladins. But the thing is, for this to be the most useful, you would want to be running a deck that's almost exclusively Draenei. So that, when you drop this, you're affecting minimum 3 to 4 cards per time that you use it. Granted, it's also a Battlecry and Death Rattle, so if you think about it that way, you're giving each one of those cards +2/+2. And theoretically, you could also drop it, wait a couple turns, let it die. So you drop it, potentially you give like 3 or 4 minions that stat, and then, you know, if you're able to draw more in between and not like throw everything down from your hand, you're potentially giving even more minions the death rattle effect. It could be pretty good. I'm withholding a lot of judgment on Draenei just because, like, it's hard to look at it without having the entire picture, and unfortunately, it's hard to do that. I guess I could, like, filter to all Draenei. Maybe I'll do that, like, as a final video, just to reevaluate all the Draenei package stuff. But it seems like it could be good if there's a way to make, like, a almost exclusively Draenei deck work. Deep Space Curator, 3 mana, 2/4 spell burst. Get a random minion of the spell's cost. Set its cost to 0. Okay. Let's say that you're playing in a fairway, and you drop this on turn 10, and you play a 7 mana spell. You get a 7 mana minion for 0 in addition to the spell. As you go down through cost, it's less good. If you could get this to stick around on board for more than a turn, or if you are playing, once again, Druid or Warrior, theoretically you can drop this and play a 10 cost spell. Are there any good 10 cost spells for either of those? I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. Could be very interesting. You would also want to think about, if you're drawing, or if you're getting a random minion, what mana cost has the best pool when you're looking at something like this. Like, obviously 8 is actually where a lot of the better cards potentially come from. But yeah, it could be interesting. I don't think this is that good, though. I mean, let me put it this way. Let's say that you were to play this low curve, right? Like, let's say that you drop this on turn 5, and you play a spell that costs 2. Let's just say in the case of Mage or something, right? You play the Ice spell, the one that freezes and does 3 damage. And then you get a 2-drop in addition to that for free. The pool of 2-drops is so large that it would be hard to really, you know, think about that. But probably you're getting somewhere around, like, 3 and 2 stats, maybe like 4 and 2, or, you know, divide that up however you want to. It never hurts to mana cheat, but this card doesn't seem that great to me. Dimensional Core, 3 mana, 3/2, Divine Shield, Starship piece. Okay. Divine Shield is super nice. It's not a taunt, so it doesn't affect the board immediately when played, and the stats are low for a 3-drop, I would say. Maybe I'm out of the loop a little bit on 3-drops, but I feel like these stats would fit with a 2-drop better than a 3-drop. But obviously a Divine Shield makes up for that in some ways, and then the fact that it's a Starship piece means that those stats also go to another thing later on. Divine Shield without rush or taunt is way worse, because you have to wait a full turn for it to affect the board in any way. Theoretically, your opponent also has kind of the ability to deal with it in many ways, you know, easier, because they get to do their stuff before you do. But adding Divine Shield to a Starship is probably really good in general. So, you know, I'm just thinking, like, let's say you play this into Death Knight. Death Knight has like a 2/1 on board. They just pop their hero power, hit your Dimensional Core with the 2/1, and they've dealt with it for less mana than you had to pay. If they're on turn 4, they still get to play a 2 mana worth. And you could say the exact same thing for Mage, or for anything that can easily, you know, Hunters probably have multiple tokens on the board that can deal with stuff. So it might depend on the matchup, but a lot of things can deal with Divine Shield pretty easily these days. But like I said, let's say that you get your starship with rush or something like that as well. Now you've got a rush divine shield, whatever in addition on your starship, and having divine shield on a bigger minion is obviously better. So yeah, this probably sees play in decks that want to have a good starship later on in the game, but maybe not. I mean, maybe playing this on 3 is just so bad that it doesn't even get played. And maybe that even limits starships, like who knows. Escape pod. This is not actually a starship part. That's interesting. I'm just reading the description for a second. Okay, sorry. 3 mana, 2/1. Rush, Death Rattle, give adjacent minions +1/+1 and rush. Interesting. I mean, this seems like a pretty nice aggro enabler slash just generally good in decks that run many small minions, right? Like, let's say you have 2/1/1s on the board that you've dropped this turn for whatever reason. That's like the worst case scenario. You drop this in the middle of them, kill it, and now you've got 2/2/2s instead. And if your opponent has additional stuff on the board that you still need to hit, then you can rush those in as well. Seems pretty nice. Styline's low for 3, but if you can make it kind of work with other stuff. The thing is, giving the additional minions rush is almost useless the majority. And maybe not, though. It's useless if you're playing this on 3. But if you're playing this, like, on 10, and you give, let's say a 7-cost minion rush, that's pretty good, generally, right? So, yeah, this is a versatile card. It probably sees some decent amount of play. Ethereal Oracle. 3 mana, 2/3, spell damage +1, spell burst, draw 2 cards. Interesting. There's not a ton of decks that I see these days that are actively trying to, kill you with spells. But if there are, then this is good. Spell damage +1 and drawing 2 spells. And let's say, I wonder actually, would this even just see play in, like, the big spell mage, honestly? Like, let's think about this, right? If you play this after you've played the spells cast instantly, or the first spell that you draw casts instantly, I mean, that's pretty annoying, really, right? Because you're guaranteed to draw a spell off of it. Even if you're drawing the thing that just gives you 4 elementals or whatever, that's still pretty nice to just have a guaranteed way to make that happen for probably just dropping a coin, or like you could even use snake oil to make this happen. So yeah, I mean, I could see this being run in a deck that doesn't even care about the spell damage potentially, which means that I think that this is a relatively good card. Ooh, another Nexus Prince, or Nexus guy, I guess. Nexus Prince Shafar. 3 mana, 3/3, spell burst, give a minion in your hand 3/3, and this spell burst. Oh, this is already in the game. And I actually put it into a deck, and I have never drawn into it yet, which is crazy. It's a cool effect. It's relatively easy to make happen. I feel like it fits best in a tempo. I tried to put it into my big spell mage, and like I said, I haven't actually made that even happen in the big spell mage, but I don't think that it actually fits that well in there, because ideally you're, kind of dropping minions and spells, 1 for 1 kind of thing or whatever, right? So you're able to keep on pushing this, because if you ever miss the spell burst, then it kind of sucks. And this thing really is a 3/3 for 3 with no additional effect until later. So the stats aren't that good. It just enables many other things to have better stats when you really get down to it. And each one of those things that get stats, still you need to pay for it, essentially. So, I think that this is a fun card. I think that it could be really good in tempo-oriented decks where you're really, like, more likely to be kind of dropping spells and minions often, but yeah, I'm interested to see how this works, because I think that this is a fun card. I think it's good to play around with. Perplexing Anomaly. 3 mana, 2/5. Rush, Taunt, Stealth. Question mark. I'm so confused. This is really a head scratcher. It doesn't make any sense. Why does it cost 3 mana? Okay. Yeah, this is odd. I think that this is a play on the Rager, like, archetype, right? But it's, like, the opposite. So it's perplexing because of that. Let's just take it at face value, though. 3 mana for a 2/5 rush. And then once it's rushed, then it has taunt. But if you don't make it happen, then it's stealthed. It's very interesting. I don't immediately think of anything that it fits into, but I think that this is I mean, having those 3 effects together does give it a lot of versatility. The 2/5 for rush is not, like, super good, but it, like, you know, it is relatively good into aggro, I guess. I think it's interesting. I don't know that it's good. I mean, I think of, like, older cards and stuff like that, like, you know, the 1/4 rush or whatever, or charge, whatever it was, like, was never really good. So, I mean, that's base set, but, you know, it depends on how the meta is. Like I said, if there's, like, a lot of aggro, I feel like this could be a nice one to just slot in. Okay, we got Relentless Wrathguard. 3 mana, 4/2. Battlecry, deal 2 damage to an enemy minion. If it dies, discover a demon. Good stats for the mana cost with an additional effect. I guess you don't play this if there's nothing to kill with it. But yeah, generally, like, effects like this, this immediately makes me think of the Frost spell from what the heck is it called? Death Knight? There we go. I was blanking on the name of the class. That discovers a Frost Room card if it kills a minion and does 3 damage. 2 damage is a little bit more limiting, but not by a ton. So I feel like this is probably pretty decent. And obviously, like, getting to discover another tool is almost always, like, a positive effect, right? Next up, we got Urzul Rager. 3 mana, 5/1. Oh, this is the actually Rager of this expansion, then. Lifesteal, Spell Burst, attack a random enemy minion. Okay. I like that, because it's, you know, you could say that it's like 4 mana, deal 5 damage to an enemy minion, a random enemy minion, and heal your hero for the same amount. Obviously, if you're able to manipulate the opponent's board such that there's only one viable option and it's got around 5 health, 4 or 5, then this is really nice. Giving it lifesteal means that it's also just pretty strong in general for, like, trying to keep yourself alive. The Ragers are all kind of meme cards to some extent, but I could see this potentially being alright. It doesn't seem terrible compared to other stuff, because at the very least, like, it's like it has rush. It's just random rush. And yeah, it's very cool. Very interesting. Better than a lot of the other Ragers that I've ever seen in my life, anyways. Astrobiologist. 2 mana, 2/2. Battlecry, at the start of your next turn, discover a spell. It's fine. The stats are nothing to write home about. Obviously, Snake Oil Salesman, like, kind of eclipses the mana curve in a lot of ways, but like this is the same stats and out of the entire spell pool as well, right? Because that's not like discover from your class or anything like that. That's just discover a spell. So the variance on it is way too high to justify its use in general, unless you're just running a deck that really just wants to have a ton of spells. Like, I guess if you're running a spell burst deck, you include this just so you have more options. And the fact that you get to discover at the start of your next turn means that you can drop this on 2 pretty effectively and, you know, make your decision the next turn based on what you actually need to do the next turn. So that's kind of a positive in some situations, but it's a negative if you're on like 6 or 7 and you need to just drop this, and then it's like, okay, well, I don't even get the effect until next turn. Maybe I die next turn. Oh, it is a Drain Eye. I didn't realize. This is a Drain Eye, meaning that it also affects Velen. Although that would then be a Death Rattle for Velen, so it's even more delayed. Is interesting. I don't know. I don't think this is like incredible as an effect for either it or Velen, personally. Braingill, 2 mana, 2/1, Murloc. Battlecry, give all friendly Murlocs Death Rattle, draw a card. Ooh. Okay, so this slots into an aggro Murloc deck incredibly, but is that really an archetype right now? What good Murlocs are in the game right now? And then also, I mean, ideally you drop this on a full board of Murlocs, but like, that means you're just, like, you're not dropping it on 2. Obviously that means that the mana cost is nice, because if you could theoretically fill your board up with Murlocs for 1s and 2s or whatever, and then drop this at the end, then you've got an entire board that easily gives you a full hand again. It's interesting. And I could see it seeing play if Murlocs are good. Crystal Welder, 2 mana, 2/3, Taunt Battlecry. If you're building a starship, gain +2/+2. If there is a starship card that costs 1, or a starship part card that costs 1, then it is very good, because theoretically you drop whatever that is on turn 1. On turn 2 you've got a 4/5 taunt. Even if not, I mean, there was a starship thing. No, there wasn't on 2 yet, but maybe there is. That's a Drain Eye, that's an Elemental, that's a Drain Eye, that's a Drain Eye. Okay, we'll confirm later. Seems pretty good to me, though. In any case where there's low-cost starship parts, which maybe we'll have to double-check that in other classes as well, if there isn't any neutral ones. This seems very, very strong. Like, obviously, it's also like a high roll thing where, like, you have to draw that and then you also have to draw this, but turn 1, turn 2 with something like that is insane. Oh, you know what, though? You need your starship part to die before that actually takes effect, so still pretty good, but I mean, I see it seeing play. Even if you drop this on, like, turn 4 for 2 mana, still, you know, a 4/5 taunt for 2 mana is, like, really, really nice. So I see this seeing play in a lot of decks that use starships. Hologram opener, or operator, not opener. 2 mana, 3/2, Battlecry, get 3 random temporary Drain Eye. Okay. We haven't seen a ton of high-cost Drain Eye yet. And so I could see you dropping this on 10 mana and then just dropping the most useful 2 out of the 3 that you actually get. In a best case scenario, you could drop all 3. It depends whether or not there are Drain Eye with effects that are useful enough that they will clear the board or do a decent amount of damage to your opponent or your, you know, whatever. Like, if they can affect the board in enough ways, then this is theoretically good, but because they're random as well, like, it could probably draw from any class's Drain Eye, The variance on it is probably too high for you to just drop this on 10 and pray for something that, like, fixes your board space or board state, but you never know, I guess. I don't know. And I wonder, I guess, if your Velen gets this as a death rattle and then dies during your opponent's turn, it's at the end of your turn, so you would get to keep those. That could actually, though, especially with other effects, like there's a lot of Draenei that are putting cards into your hand. You're almost guaranteed when Velen dies to, like, overdraw and fatigue yourself. Not fatigue, just, you know, burn cards out of your deck. If you run too many things that put stuff into your hand anyways, which this is kind of another one of those things. Interesting, maybe useful. Hard to tell without knowing all the other Draenei. Moonstone Mauler, 2 mana, 2/2, Battlecry, shuffle 3 asteroids into your deck that deal 2 damage to a random enemy when drawn. To your own deck, which is easier to affect than your opponent's deck. Deal 2 damage to a random enemy when drawn. I mean, this doesn't hurt to throw into a deck generally. The stats are lower than you would want for a 2-drop, but long term throughout the game this does something for you. Although to a random enemy means it could also hit the enemy hero, so inherently that affects the board less and therefore adds to the variance. And really 2 damage is most useful in the first like 5 or 6 turns. Not even, like, realistically the first like 3 turns, so this is probably not that great. Although it does say perfect and evolve shaman, so yeah, I mean, that's true. I still don't think that 6 damage randomly split among your entire enemy board is incredible, but I guess it doesn't hurt. I don't know. Stranded Spaceman. This is another Draenei. 2 mana, 2/3. Battlecry, the next Draenei you play gains +2 health and rush. Okay. Giving other Draenei rush is theoretically very good. And therefore, it increases the usefulness of all other Draenei that I've already looked at. This, if there's Draenei decks that are good, this probably is in all of them, I would say. Giving anything rush is extremely good, in my opinion. And then +2 health is a nice bonus as well. Troubled Mechanic, 2 mana, 2/1, Divine Shield, Spellburst, draw Draenei, and it is itself a Draenei. It doesn't have a Battle Cry or a Death Rattle. Sorry, I need to double check Velen. Yeah, so this doesn't affect Velen directly in any way. However, that doesn't mean that it's bad because you're drawing into other Draenei and it's a 2 mana, 2/1 Divine Shield. The Divine Shield helps it to actually use its Spell Burst, assuming that your opponent isn't, once again, like Mage or Death Knight. Meaning basically that you could probably drop this on 2 relatively safely a lot of the time, even if you can't use a spell right afterwards. And probably still be able to do the thing, but it's probably best to drop it on 3 and actually guarantee the Spell Burst. Interesting. Interesting that it's got, like, not direct synergy with Velen, but it's still in the tribe, but obviously because you're able to draw more Draenei off of it, it's still good. Astral Vigilant, 1 mana, 1/1, Battlecry, get a copy of the last Draenei you played. Okay, another Draenei enabler, but it is not a Draenei, so it also, this Battlecry does not go to Velen. It does mean that you're able to use up to 4 copies, I guess, of any Draenei in your deck. So that's not bad. If there's a way to copy Astral Vigilant as well, I mean, you could, you know, make some very interesting stuff happen, but yeah, once again, if there's good Draenei decks, then this is probably pretty good. I mean, at 1 mana, 1/1, you can drop this with, like, any Draenei. Actually, is Velen of Draenei? He is, so you, so if there's any good Velen decks, you drop Velen, you drop Astral Vigilant right afterwards, get another copy of Velen, repeat twice. So that's very strong, if Velen is strong. Space Pirate, 1 mana, 2/1, Death Rattle, your next weapon costs 1 less, and it's a pirate. I mean, the stats are good on 1. If you're running a weapon, why wouldn't you run this? Because the effect is going to affect you at any point in the game, because it's just your next one. Seems pretty good to me. I don't really have anything else to say about that. Starlight Wanderer. This is the last neutral card to look at. 1 mana, 2/1, Battlecry, your next Draenei, or the next Draenei you play gets 2/2/+1, and it is a Draenei itself. Yeah, good card. I would say very good card. But if Draenei is good, this is good, because why wouldn't you want to play this on 1? If it's just going to boost something later on. Even if you end up getting the effect 5 turns from now, still good, but if you get the effect next turn, way better as well. So, Starlight Wanderer is very nice. I like it. And with that, that is all of the neutral cards. I guess the ones that have been currently revealed, or maybe all of them that will be in the expansion. I'm not sure how the reveals are working right now, but yeah, those are my thoughts on all of the neutral cards for the Great Dark Beyond. I'm interested to know anyone else's thoughts, if anyone watches this, and if they do, if they have any interesting thoughts about the cards that I'm not thinking of, leave a comment below, and I will try and go through all the rest of these. It's a big task, but we've got about 15 days left before the next expansion, so even if I just pump one of these out like every couple days, we'll still be fine. But yeah, like I said, I'm very, very excited for this new expansion. I've been playing Hearthstone for quite a while, and there have been times where I've been very disappointed in the design space, but the idea of starships and stuff has got me really excited, so hopefully that is not unjustified, and we'll see what this expansion brings. Thanks for watching if you did, and I'll see you all soon.